Well, I was watching Jeremy Parrish review some Game Boy games on his Super Game Boy Works series. It's actually none of those. And then he mentioned this puzzle game that was basically a precursor to Twinkle Star Sprites. That had my attention. So it's a puzzle shoot 'em up. That got my attention. So today, I present Quarth. Unfortunately, Quarth did not work, but blockhl did work. This is, of course, a clever pun. Well, let's learn how to play. Although, the very first thing you have to learn is how to not be creeped out by that giant moon guy in the background. Anyway, I'm sure you can read, but the basic gameplay is you've got a bunch of blocks coming at you, that don't resemble Tetris blocks at all, so you can shoot blocks at them, unlike a typical shoot 'em up. Now, obviously you can fill in the shapes like normal, or you can be a little clever about it and make a bigger shape. And then what's interesting is, like, well, yeah, this shape, they filled in everything, but, like, some shapes coming out, it's not necessarily that every block has to be filled in, but, like, you have to have enough blocks on the outside for it to work. And, yeah, blocks will kill you if they reach the bottom. Unfortunately, even as you're clearing blocks, like, you can still press the speed up button to make them go down, and they'll still kill you, even if they reach the bottom of the screen. So you do have to wait for the blocks to finish clearing before you can go on. I mean, to a normal person, this is not, like, so much of a deal, but to me, I'm a little impatient. This constantly annoys me. Also, your ship can shoot 4 blocks at a time. I'm not sure how relevant that is. Okay, so you can press up to speed things up. I mean, I felt silly explaining that, but, I mean, it's one of those things that, well, you press up to speed up. It's like, okay, that makes sense. And then you think about it, you're like, well, most arcade games don't let you do that. Well, speed up specifically with up, and you see when they're clearing, they're still sticking around. And so, this was mentioned, it's like the precursor to Twinkle Star Sprites, and I can kind of see it. Because you've got enemy patterns coming in, and you have to think, well, sometimes you have to actually think, and you can't just rely on instinct, but you have to think, like, what's the best way of clearing a pattern? And if you're a little smart about it, you can clear the whole thing at once. Hey! And, don't worry, if you thought the last creepy moon would be in the how to play screen, no. For better or worse, he's gonna follow you throughout the entire game. Now, I originally saw this on the Game Boy Works show, where this was the Game Boy version. Well, this is the arcade version. Jeremy Parrish was playing the Game Boy version. And it's nice, but the game, as is often pointed out, the Game Boy just is not really fast enough to handle all this block scrolling action. And so it just really was not able to keep things going. Also, what annoyed me was the guy playing, like, this guy did not know how to clear more blocks at a time. He would only ever clear, like, 1 block at a time. And it's like, check this out. This is not exactly rocket science, but there's a way to clear these a little more efficiently than just shape after shape. Because see, I can be like here, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. That actually didn't do what I thought it would do, but I like to pretend like it did. I mean, you can't always go for the big combos, which is a little bit annoying, especially in comparison to Twinkle Star Sprites, which is just so willing to let you always get away with big combos. Well, in fact, in Twinkle Star Sprites, there always were big combos to get. Whereas this game, it seems a little more restrained. Also, oh my gosh. Pow, 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 pow. It really seems to reward, like, precision and getting exactly the right amount of blocks gone. Now when you're shooting out those ones, well, okay, to finish off a block, you actually don't need that much precision, But if like one of those little blocks where you got to set off 2 sets of 2, like you need to be getting that exactly right. And the little known secret, well, it was a little more efficient than normal. Although something that Jeremy Parrish did notice and frequently relied on, if you make a really big block, then things will pause for a second. And there's my magnum opus. You make a really big block and things will pause for a second. Now, he was continually, like, artificially making these really big blocks. I'd like to think I am a little more elegant and I can make big blocks based on what I see in front of me. Oh yeah, and see, if you accidentally miss, then you make a block a little bit bigger and you kind of make your own problem worse. That is kind of an interesting aspect for a puzzle game where, like, you can easily make things worse. Well, okay. I guess that's kind of a hallmark of puzzle games, huh? Ever since Tetris, where it's all... Oh, I gotta think for this one. Okay, now I can speak. I mean, you play Tetris, and that's sort of the game's hallmark, like, making things harder for yourself. But you play a game like Twinkle Star Sprites, and there's not really... I almost got away with it, too, if it wasn't for you measly other piece... Oh, that's an interesting picture. Oh, that's the backspace. It looks like a flying Cupid, but apparently it's a back arrow. Who'da thunk? Oh. So there's a timer to put in a coin, but there's obviously not a timer to continue. Oh. Hey, you can continue. In the Game Boy version, you notably cannot continue. You are stuck in this sort of eternal kind of trying to beat the stages. On the bright side, you can choose what stage you want to start on, but like on the downside, I'm pretty sure you'll get bored of everything. And again, just skill at this game kind of comes from memorizing like what patterns work, what patterns don't. I don't 100% buy that this game is a precursor to Twinkle Star Sprites, but if you told me, well, okay, but at least I can agree that the gameplay sort of feels like Twinkle Star Sprite. I'm starting to see how he had such a problem with this game. I mean, of course, I fancy myself as better than him, but as is becoming readily apparent, by how much? Maybe not by all that much. Disappointing. Okay. Thankfully, I saw that flashing block way out, but I don't know that I could have cleared that pattern fast enough. And here I was complaining that the game would not go fast enough. And already the game is heeding my plea, and it's making things faster than I could ever handle. Oh, I see. Well, maybe they were already big enough, but I want to say that it was because I cleared 2 at once. Then that counted as enough blocks cleared and paused the action. That didn't really help. I see. And there were some traps here, because, like, it's not always worth your while to try to make a thing bigger. Because, again, like, you're only gonna get... Well, you need to shoot... Like, you can only shoot blocks so quickly. And so you need to know what you're doing. Like, there, it totally would have made sense to just block it off. But here, it kind of doesn't. Like, okay, here, for just a measly 3, then you can clear 2 at once. And for a measly 6, then you can do sort of the same thing. But filling all this up, maybe not worth it. So it's a puzzle game that really makes you think. Yes, a puzzle game that really makes you think. Far unlike any other game. See, like what I was trying to do there, it's just not worth it. It's not going to pay off. I've only made things far worse for myself. You see, it's not, there's no, Well, that's Quark. Now, I do find it a little bit interesting that it lets you, like, continue along. It's not even, like, kicking me back to the start. I mean, the Game Boy game did, of course, kick you back to the start. You really need precision on those ones. Like, you have to shoot out exactly the right number of shots. Well, if I hadn't completely screwed up, then that would have been pretty good. But I do kind of appreciate the Game Boy one, where it kind of kicks you back to the main thing and then asks, can you do it for real this time? Because here, it's like, yeah, I'm making continual progress, but it's really just because I've got more credits than Fort Knox. But it's not really my own skill that's carrying me through. Oh my god, this pattern, it just hurts my brain. And like, I don't even know where to begin. So I think I'll stop. How would you... Can you even... And especially because it comes at you so quickly, like... There's nothing you can do. I'm beginning to think this game is rigged. Like... Well... I mean, okay, certainly it's probably rigged. But, I mean, you gotta think about it, because, like, you're comparing this to Twinkle Star Sprites. And that's a game where, yes, there are patterns you have to deal with, but, like, dealing with the patterns themselves is pretty easy. Like, you can deal with patterns all day, because the one enemy explodes and you can pretty much get away with everything. In this game, patterns can be incredibly deadly. After a while, there's, like, no real way to deal with patterns. And so, I guess you gotta strike a middle ground with this sort of game, where you gotta make the patterns hard enough to deal with, or you gotta do something else. Well, okay, to Twinkle Star Sprites' credit, there's a lot more to the game than just dealing with the patterns, because you also have the enemy shots, and you get kind of a Puyo back and forth sort of thing going. And then you have to judge, like, is it worth it to send, things back to the enemy? Is it worth it to save them up? Is it worth it to ignore it? And you get a lot of interesting decisions with that. This game, it's pretty much just a logic puzzle, but there is that element of, like, real-time reflexes required sort of thing. And, like, well, I don't know about you, but most of the people I know who kind of prefer puzzle games, they kind of like their kind of slow and drawn-out gameplay. Oh, that guy on the left's pretty smart. And they would not necessarily appreciate... Ah, okay, that's a pretty smart way to clear that pattern. They would not necessarily appreciate a game of this speed. Me personally, though, I can handle with the reflexes thing. I can kind of handle it, but... I mean, the problem is... I kind of wanted to read that, but... Because it goes by so quickly. That's another thing that's, like, so ridiculous. Like, why is it just rushing through the text? Does it not have any confidence in the text? It seems like okay text. I mean, it seems like an okay game for me, but, like, it seems like the kind of game where you have to play it a few times, and then you can get, like, a sense for what sort of patterns come in and how to deal with them best. And then it almost becomes sort of, like, when you play Tetris but you know what you're doing, then it becomes sort of the Zen experience, where you just kind of play the game, not necessarily to improve, not necessarily to test yourself, but just to engage in sort of this Zen-like activity. Personally, I like playing Tetris Attack and engaging in this Zen-like activity. And so I'm sure you can work your way up to get something like this, or to get the same sort of effect in this sort of game. And okay, that works. But, man... Yeah, it does kind of emphasize, though, that Twinkle Star Sprites is something special, because in addition to, like the backbone, the heritage of Twinkle Star Sprites is in puzzle games, but the actual gameplay is kind of more like a shoot-'em-up. And so you kind of deal with that. And so, honestly, I just prefer that, like, kind of other stuff approach to this. Alright, let's see if I can read the fast-scrolling text, but otherwise, that'll about do it. Although I am kind of glad I saw Black Hole. It's definitely an interesting mark on gameplay history. You know, next I should search for that other versus shoot 'em up. There is another versus shoot 'em up, vaguely like Twinkle Star Sprites, but this one actually uses like real airplanes, so it looks like a Strikers 1945 clone. This is so you can send garbage to the other player, and it looks like, okay, 1-to-1 blocks sent, blocks received. But again, like, it's rewarding the, like, who can do it more efficiently. Now this would almost be worthwhile to try playing with someone else. Now this versus mode seems pretty cool, and I also like how even though it's at the top, it obscures your view, so it still hurts you. The year 1990X, the delicate balance of gravity has disintegrated. The ensuing cataclysm has produced a deadly phenomenon, black hole. This destructive force has crashed and devoured everything in its path. It is heading for Earth. That was harder than I thought it would be, but not for the reason I thought it would be, because like I almost read it too quickly. And so it's like, well, now you're just getting messed up. It's kind of funny with scrolling text. You have to read it at its speed. It doesn't go by your speed. Have you ever tried reading a book with like that sort of auto-scrolling text? It is, well, I won't say it's an abysmal experience, although I kind of want to, but it is certainly a different experience than reading text at like your own pace. And I guess that kind of feeds into this game, where playing a puzzle game at your own pace is something that's very kind of enjoyable. But playing a puzzle game at its own self-enforced pace is something very different. And on that note, this cat's got a scat.